Hey guys! Okay, so today I'm going to try and combine a little bit of US history and economics, and so I'm going to start with the history and then move into some economic concepts. So I wanted to talk about industrialization and economic booms that we've had throughout history, and we'll start post-Civil War, which is, 1865. And basically, what's going to happen post 1865, post Civil War, the United States Industrial Revolution, so to speak, the American Industrial Revolution, is going to explode. Industrialization is going to increase exponentially. And one of the major reasons why that occurs is because we completed our first transcontinental railroad in 1869. It made it easier to transport goods, people, raw materials, you name it. It all occurred. Everything happened on the railroad. Towns grew up because of the railroad. They popped up out of nowhere because of the railroad. And it became an integral part of American life, especially American business. In fact, it was the first major big business. And what that means is, like huge profit margins, huge cash flows. You might want to call them monopolies. And in fact, we've talked about monopolies, but that's where the first big business occurs. And it's really showing that shift from artisan or cottage industry, where people were working out of their homes or making things out of from their living rooms, and people were buying them directly, to this like mass-produced, monopolized industry. Some major names to come out of the railroading industry are going to be Jay Gould, Cornelius Vanderbilt, and Leland Stanford. Now, I know at least two names sound familiar, or they should, because they have universities named after them. And the reason why those universities are named after them is because they put up the money and founded those universities. So Vanderbilt University and Stanford University. Now, despite making billions of dollars, these men are what are called captains of industry or robber barons, depending upon how you look at them. Because captains of industry, because they increase the economic bottom line, and they really grew industry within the United States and made us not one of, the fastest growing economy in the world at the turn of the 20th century. Now, Jay Gould, just so really quickly, because he's super interesting in that he's like super evil. He was like, in American history, the 9th wealthiest American ever. Worth tons of money. But Condé Nast is actually going to rank him as the 8th worst CEO in American history. Ever. Meaning, he was a pretty evil guy. He essentially, he like watered stock or bloated stock in railroads that he owned. So that people would invest thinking that it was a strong company, that it was a good company, and it turns out then he would like sell it and the price would drop and he would make a gazillion dollars and then run away with it, and people were left with these stocks that were pretty much worth nothing. Nothing at all. So yeah, interesting but evil. Now, the next major industry to grow out of railroading, because remember, railroading made everything else possible. It opened up the entire United States, continental United States. And Andrew Carnegie is going to build up U.S. Steel, and he's going to use horizontal integration. Basically, he's going to own every step of production, enabling him to never use a middleman and being able to undercut his competition. And he's also going to use what's called the Bessemer process. I talked to some of you guys about this earlier. Then we have John D. Rockefeller using vertical integration, and he's basically just going to take over the whole joint. His company is called Standard Oil. In the 1870s through the 90s, by the 1890s, he's going to own 90% of the market. 90. That's insane. Insane. Eventually, Standard Oil is going to be broken up, but even one of the broken up is still huge and still around today, and you might know them, they're ExxonMobil, right? Another one we need to talk about is J.P. Morgan. He does banking, and okay, so how he makes his billions is banking, financing, and industrial consolidation. The man is known for creating monopolies, hence the game, right? This is J.P. Morgan. Not a nice guy, kind of an angry guy. Does not donate much, unlike Rockefeller and Carnegie and Vanderbilt and Stanford. They donate a lot of their money, and so they're going to be known as, captains of industry. Robber barons, however, are the guys who take all the money for themselves and, yeah, don't help anyone. Charles Goodnight, he is, if you've ever heard of the Goodnight Loving Trail, the cattle trail, he is going to make tons of money in the cattle industry. So all of this is happening at the same time. So it's economic and industrial boom after industrial boom after industrial boom. And so what this does to our economy is it makes it explode, which is kind of cool. At the same time, we have inventions happening, Alexander Graham Bell, Edison. We've got, because of those two, we have electricity and the telephone, and if you keep following through history, all of our economic booms are basically chartered by major industrial booms and inventions. So you've got the radio and the TV, and you've got the computer industry, and over and over and over again, all of this stuff is leading to increased productivity. It's leading to increased job and increased employment. And when you have increased employment, you have increased spending, and you have increased GDP, and you have increased business spending and increased consumer spending, and overall, the economy is growing. Now, here's the thing. These booms, even if they are just one business or just one good, they're so large that they can't be seen as a single business or a single boom. They can't be seen as microeconomics. They're so huge, they are making national impact. They are affecting national supply and national demand because of that ripple effect. So in economics, we call that aggregate supply and aggregate demand, because aggregate means total. So what you're looking at is, with AS and AD, is you're looking at national production with aggregate supply and national consumption with aggregate demand. So let's look at the model, because I know you're really excited about economic models. But first I need to go back and review GDP, I think. So with real GDP, you have C plus I plus G plus X. So that is consumer spending you have investments in business, you have government spending, and you have net exports, which is exports minus imports. Now, here's the best part. Real GDP equals AD, or aggregate demand. So the curve, if we draw it, also notice, remember how I had it price and quantity? Well, on a national level, it's price level and GDP/employment. Okay? So when you're drawing your demand curve, it's going to look a bit different, but not too different. Because it's macro, you're actually going to include that curved part. With micro, you only look at this small part. But with macro, you look at all of this. I'm going to label that AD1. Okay? Now, what you have here is it shows that relationship between price level and GDP and employment. And now when you think price level, you need to think about inflation, how prices are growing, how they're going up, okay? So what's going to happen, what it's showing is that with price changes, you have changes in GDP and employment, or changes in aggregate demand. Now, on the other hand, your aggregate supply is going to look a little differently as well. That's AS1. And aggregate supply is just like microeconomic supply. As the price level goes up, supply goes up, because as a producer, as a supplier, even on a national level, if you have higher prices, you're going to produce more. So, now just look at right here, we have aggregate equilibrium. Okay? So that is 0.1 for GDP and employment. And that is 0.1 PL1. Okay? Now let's say if you're in the expansion phase of the business cycle, and that means if you're in an expansion, that means that people have more money, so spending is going to go up. Consumer spending is going to go up. Investment in business is going to go up. Most likely because you're producing more, your exports, your net exports is going to increase. Your government spending, we haven't really gotten to that, but we will, is probably going to increase. So what you're going to do is you're going to have an entire shift in the aggregate demand curve to the right, because right is raise and left is less. We'll label this AD2, and now you have a whole new equilibrium. Now look what happens in an expansion. This model shows you exactly what happens in an expansion. So your GDP and employment grew. It went up. When AD goes up, then GDP and employment go up. But at the same time, your price level is going up. Okay? And that's okay. That's okay. Your price level, your inflation rate, that's okay as long as it stays under, the growth stays under 3%. If that's where it's at, this is a great time for you as the suppliers overall to enjoy a price level that increased without you having to do anything. This had nothing to do with you. This is called demand pull inflation, meaning demand pulled the prices up. You did nothing. This is a sweet spot for you. So what you need to do as a business owner is use this as your chance to create an economic boom, to create something that is going to lead people to spend more so that you can retain more profits. Because knowing the business cycle, just the natural inclination of our economy, lean times are coming. And I don't want you to be caught off guard. Just going to say it again, lean times are coming. Don't be caught off guard. All right, see you next time.